hay noticias muy buenas. Supuestamente, por lo que vi, no es nada oficial, pero hay filtraciones que sugieren que podría llegar a haber un nuevo juego de inFAMOUS. Una saga que me encanta, sobre todo el Second Son. Y es un juegazo, pero tremendo. Bueno, por lo que vi, no sé si es un insider, no tengo ni idea. Creo que no era un insider, pero una fuente dijo que es muy probable que esté en desarrollo. Creo que era un remake. Puede ser un juego nuevo, pero creo que era tirando un remake de la saga de inFAMOUS. O sea que puede llegar a haber un remake del 1. Con esto sugiere que puede llegar a revivir la saga. En la nota que leí, si no me equivoco, no va a estar a cargo del proyecto Sucker Punch, que es la empresa que hizo los inFAMOUS. Creo que iba a tomar las riendas otro estudio aparte de Sony. No sé si decía cuál era, creo que no.
The last couple of years.
Yo entiendo y lo voy traduciendo.
Hey there, gamers, Dreamcast Guy here. Today we're talking about PlayStation because there's been such an odd thing happening at Sony for the last couple of years. Like, consider the fact that PlayStation is bigger than ever with 94 million PS5 sold. They've made something like $20 billion in profit this generation, but what are their great series? Like, truly consider that. Sit down and think about this. Like, if you were growing up with late PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, even the PlayStation 4, there was entire series that were created by Sony.
Es que encima lo que tiene la Play ahora, boludo, la Play 5 no tiene exclusivos ahora. No tiene nada, si te pones a pensar. El que se compró la Play ahora, lo único que le viene bien es el GTA 6. Pero después no se me ocurre por qué te podés querer comprar una Play 5. Te conviene más la Xbox. Con el Game Pass te compró un montón de... Te comprás el Game Pass y tenés un montón de juegos, boludo.
A lot of people inside of Sony are currently working on some sort of initiative to bring these games back. Now, currently, we're not exactly sure if this is going to be remakes, if this is going to be new games in the series, like, I don't know, some sort of like Infamous 3, but I want to take a look at it because the source on it is extremely good. Other people are actually
dice que es muy buena fuente la de... La que dice que puede haber un nuevo proyecto de inFAMOUS. Puede estar los subtítulos acá también.
There was a lot of hubbub similarly with Nintendo at the time, where when the Nintendo Switch first came out, it had a decent amount of very good new games, but a lot of people were upset that there wasn't any back catalog. There was no way to really play the old IP. And since then, obviously, Nintendo's done a lot to bring back their old games and do new games. And I almost feel like, I think that Sony needs to start sort of copying that MO. Bringing back the old stuff, making the old
Yo me acuerdo cuando salió la Wii también había muchos que decían eso, de que estaba bien por algunos juegos, pero no tenía tanto juego. Pues la Wii, me acuerdo, dije la Wii o dije la Switch. Cuando salió la Switch también tuvo como medio esta polémica de que había salido con buenos juegos, pero no salió con muchos así propios de Switch, sino que salió como con... Era medio pelo, o sea, eran entre juegos medio pelo y también juegos retrocompatibles que había salido. Pero por él, creo que de salida era Breath of the Wild, que ni siquiera es de la Switch, es de la Wii U. Y el 1-2 Switch había salido... No me acuerdo, yo me acuerdo la tuve ahí cuando recién salió la Switch. Pero salió con pocos juegos también. Tuvo como esa polémica.
An infamous remake, and let me tell you, I'm so excited I'm getting more bald than Cole MacGrath. Let's get into it. Hi, hope you're having a great day. If you could please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Okay. So this is the first tweet. We're going to go through a lot of stuff here, but I wanted to start with this specifically. So this dude is actually the senior build engineer and IP preservation at PlayStation. This is a dude...
Ingeniero jefe de compilación y preservación de propiedad intelectual en PlayStation.
This position was very recently created. There was a lot of hiring sprees that happened that essentially there is this new whole branch of PlayStation that's job it is to seemingly go back
me encantaría que saquen un Killzone. Me acuerdo que el Killzone de la Play 4 estaba muy bueno. El 5 creo que era, que fue el último.
Remake, rewire, redo a lot of these older games. And here's a guy saying, hey, preservation journey is on its way and we're looking not to stop anytime soon. Being able to share our vision, work, and hopes and dreams with Sony leadership with a special moment for our team. I'm excited to see where it goes from here. And in this picture, it's interesting because you see Sly Cooper, Parappa the Rappa. I see Jack and Daxter here, and of course, a very prominent Ape Escape. These are all IP that are not just gone, they're long since dead. And look at this. This is an official slide from like an official PlayStation presentation. Very interesting indeed. A lot of people at the time when this came out about 10 days ago, a lot of people were kind of raising eyebrows like, huh, this was definitely like cleared for release. This is clearly Sony signaling the fact that they're trying to bring stuff back. But then we started to get these tweets about bringing back the actual classic. So Nate the Hate said this last night. There's truth to Sony exploring and considering reviving some of their classic unused IP. Now this was in reply to people are sort of
Ese Puppeteer, yo me acuerdo que tenía la demo en la Xbox. Pero esto no es de Sony, ¿o sí? Ese Puppeteer yo me acuerdo que tenía la demo y siempre lo probaba y me encantaba y no sé por qué nunca me lo jugué entero. Demo y siempre lo probaba y me encantaba y no sé por qué nunca me lo jugué entero.
Some of their classic unused IP. Now this was in reply to people are sort of talking about, for some reason, a state of play a week from today. So next Sunday, May 24th. Now to be clear, this is a bit of a weird one because there's never been a state of play on a Sunday. I don't really fully believe it. I do think there is going to be a state of play at the end of May because historically they always like to be there a little bit before Summer Games Fest. But this was interesting because him sort of acknowledging, it feels like he's saying, yes, there is going to be stuff there. Yes, Sony is cooking. And even if you don't see it today, tomorrow, the next day, there is a lot in the oven. But look at this. We've never been more back. Sly Cooper, Resistance, Twisted Metal, Resistance.
Los Twisted Metal
any dormant
son
PlayStation
juegazo,
franchise
boludo.
is on the table for a comeback. Look at this. And I always do forget about stuff like Siphon Filter, The Legend.
El Twisted Metal Black era un
Like,
juegazo.
even Motorstorm, right? These are games that dominated the PlayStation 3. Like, literally, this stuff is what sold PlayStation 3s, is stuff like Motorstorm. And now they're just gone. They're not even like gone in the fact that, oh man, we stopped getting new games. It's weird that Motorstorm is not playable at all natively on the PlayStation 5. You have that crappy cloud streaming masters of this stuff. But now let's get into the meat and potatoes, right? So Sony is reportedly developing a new inFAMOUS game. This was Jordan Midler on the VGC podcast. There's a groundswell of people that want inFAMOUS. I'm under the impression that there is an inFAMOUS thing happening.
Esto es lo que había visto. Que había dicho eso, el chabón. De que da la impresión de que va a haber algo, que lo que dice, algo, o de que está la impresión de que va a pasar algo con inFAMOUS en cualquier minuto en PlayStation.
In PlayStation at the minute. So essentially saying the original people over at Sucker Punch are perhaps not working on it. Makes sense. They're probably working on, I don't know, Ghost of Yotei 3 or something like that. Or there is a lot of talk, though, about how interesting this is as a development, because inFAMOUS was such a system seller. Like, people forget this now. At the time, Prototype came out the same week as this, and Prototype was on both systems. Prototype was on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and it was always wild to me that inFAMOUS was just, like, even though it's a very similar mechanic, you know, random guy accidentally gets superpowers, roams around New York City for about 30 hours, this is sort of the same vibe, and somehow it sold way more copies, way more systems, and looked way better. inFAMOUS was an actual game changer. But
el parkour, me acuerdo del inFAMOUS con Sony, estaba muy bueno.
A very reputable source before we expand on that quote more. So,
capaz que como lo jugué muy de chico, por ahí cuando lo jugué muy chico me pasó esto de que lo recordaba mejor. Puede ser que si hoy lo juego de hecho haya envejecido mal, no estoy seguro igual.
So I trust him. It sounds like he thinks it's potentially inFAMOUS 1 and 2 related, but what's also interesting is that Sucker Punch has, as far as I can tell, deleted their July 2022 blog post where they said they had no more plans for inFAMOUS. Now, this is Colin Moriarty. Colin Moriarty is interesting because this guy, he talks a lot to people.
Bueno, dice acá que en julio, o sea que el post que hicieron en su blog Sucker Punch, que era la empresa original, borró un post de julio de 2022 que decía que no tenían más planes de seguir con la saga.
PlayStation, but he doesn't really do any leaks himself. I think Colin Moriarty has this like journalistic standard where he thinks, I don't need to leak it. If they want to post something, if they want to do a controlled leak, if they want to post something on 4chan, they can do that without my help. He's the type of guy like me where I'd rather report on leaks than do the leaking myself. So I like the fact that he's standing up here and saying, hey, Jordan definitely knows what's up. So if he's heard this, even if he doesn't hear about it enough to the degree that he wants to write a full-blown article on VGC, it's very, very valid to think that perhaps inFAMOUS is coming back. Now, the talk is that it's inFAMOUS 1 and 2 and not
Se veía hermoso, me acuerdo. El Second Son se veía muy bien, boludo.
Honestly, anything, right?
Y la historia estaba muy buena.
Second Son and that smoke magic, the TV flying powers and stuff, the concrete Magneto characters and stuff. I wish that we get anything inFAMOUS, whether it is a full-blown trilogy collection, a fancy remaster, or if it ends up being a sequel. I really, really hope it is just a full-blown sequel. But here's another part of the quote that is extra, extra interesting. So, You may have noticed this is not reported as a story on VGC because it's not something I can stand up with two sources. But you hear things on the Win, and I feel like my Win has a pretty good track record. Now, this is definitely true. Jordan Middler has a very, very good track record. Sometimes people insult him for saying, oh, he doesn't leak stuff first. A lot of times after a leak exists, he'll come out here and say, oh, yes, and also these additional details. But in my experience, Jordan definitely knows what's up. Sometimes he's not the first to report on a leak, but a lot of times when he leaks stuff, the track record from my memory, from everything I've read, has been 100%. He's the kind of guy who doesn't talk about something until it's, well, worth talking about. But
yo no conozco mucho de los que hacen filtración y todo eso.
Jordan replied, I
No
have
estoy muy
absolutely
metido.
no idea. When I was told about it, I fully assumed the person was referring to a remake of Infamous 1 and 2 that wasn't told to me directly, but that was very much implied. But yeah, obviously Sony could just put it into the garbage can. It might have been something that started and never got any legs or anything like that, but at least that's what I've been told. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. This is what he called into kind of funny vids. I think that PlayStation needs to release more exclusives. I still think that Sony is in such an odd spot where I think they feel super confident because everybody else is making best-selling games. Like, think about something like whenever they release the numbers of, Crimson Desert or Resident Evil Requiem. What's the top-selling platform? PS5 by 10 metric miles. And when they look at that, like, Sony doesn't say, man, I wish our games were selling. They think, yay, free money. And I do think that Sony, before
que
it is
literal,
too late, with how long
no sé por qué no
development cycle-
sacan tanto. A ver, capaz les quedará más cómodo los publishers de los juegos de otro. No tengo mucha idea cómo funciona, pero no sé por qué no están sacando tantos exclusivos. Lo más probable es porque les convenga más económicamente solamente publicar juegos de otros y listo.
are, they need to go back to making a good chunk of actual exclusives because it's going to get to the point where people are going to go, okay, does Sony really matter? I mean, it's just another console. Anybody could make this console, right? I think the whole fun of something is you get the third party and the first party. And now that they've just completely given up on first party, I do think objectively it weakens the proposition of the PlayStation brand. I don't know. These are some off-the-cuff thoughts. How do you feel about this? And how do you feel about the idea of the revival of stuff like Legend of Dragoon, and more specifically Infamous? Personally, I would love an Infamous 1 and 2 remake. I really want an Infamous 3 just because, man, bringing back Cole for a brand new adventure, current day, have that mother frying phones and stuff. Count me in for that. But thanks so much for watching. If you could, please give this video a like, subscribe.
Bueno, eso. Se dice que puede llegar a haber un remake del Infamous, o que están trabajando en un remake de Infamous 1 y por ahí el 2. Para mí lo más probable es que, y lo que tendrá sentido, no creo que hagan una edición con el remake del 1 y el 2. Lo más probable es que hagan el 1 y si les sigue sirviendo la saga, de ahí vayan de vuelta para adelante.